Well, welcome everyone. My name is Lily Cruz, and I am one of your facilitators today for our Learning Institute. I am the Director of Partnerships and Learning at Ingenuity. I think I just made my 90 days at the last Learning Institute. I had made my 60 days. Now I've just made my 90 days there. And I come into this space as a Boricua, as a Chicago kid, as a CPS alum, as a CPS former teacher, school leader, and parent, who is grounded in the value of la cultura cura, which means if you don't speak Spanish, culture heals, culture is medicine. And I want to go ahead and pass it to our co-facilitators who will be joining us from Hyde Park School of Dance to let them introduce themselves. So Tara, I will pass it to you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So glad to see all the names here today. My name is Tara Ortiz Dernbaugh. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director at Hyde Park School of Dance. I will toss it to my colleague, Allison, for the next one.
Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Ratliff. I am currently the Director of Community Engagement at Hyde Park School of Dance, but I am also an alumna, part of faculty, and I was Associate Artistic Director for about 10 or 11 years. I will now pass it on to Amber.
Hello, everyone. I am Amber Eccles. My pronouns are she, her. I am a faculty member and a communications manager at Hyde Park School of Dance.
Awesome. Thank you all. And want to spend some time just grounding us in our why and our objectives and a few more things before we pass it over to Hyde Park School of Dance. And so I'll start with our why. So Ingenuity's mission, we hope it's very clear, but it's to ensure that every student in every grade in every school has access to the arts as part of a well-rounded education. And at Ingenuity, we focus on four primary strategies to reach that vision, that mission for students. And that is through our data and research, which really gives us great information on what is currently happening, minutes, programs, schools, neighborhoods, where do we see inequities, how can we push towards equity through advocacy. Through the Creative School Fund, we're able to provide grants to schools and partners to work together. And actually, my colleague, Kalina, is here, who is the director of the Creative School Fund. And then partnerships and learning. Hi, Kalina. And also my team, which is partnerships and learning. So really being able to connect with partners and provide learning spaces for all of us to kind of be in that space together and learning together. And also, when we talk about well-rounded arts education, when we talk about arts education in general, we really are talking about what we call the values of quality, which were co-created with the arts sector pre-pandemic. And I have them on the screen and also just want to call out the ones that will really be highlighted today with our learning. And that is that values of quality, the values of quality, we want to make sure it is physically and emotionally safe, embraces diversity and cultural competence, is strengths-based, requires equity, and is purposeful and intentional. And there's probably other connections to many of the qualities as well, but again, wanted to really name some of the ones that we are intentionally spending some time on today. Also, want to share our upcoming programming. So, our programming this year is really around rooting in community, but also relating with ourselves and thinking about how the work starts with us as individuals, within our organizations, within our collectives. And there will be a community of practice on March 6th. That will be the deep dive into pathways to accessibility. So, we really wanted to be intentional today about really focusing on the personal biases part and not putting too much into one session, but we're going to build on that for March 6th and then really have that focus on a pathway to accessibility. But we have some other events coming up in March and May. And a really big one that if you have not registered, we want to make sure that you are there because we'd love to see you. That is our State of the Arts convening. Um, and actually, can you all see my screen? I am
I
sharing
can't,
this.
Lily.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't know if it's just me.
So, no, I appreciate that because I am showing a screen. And here we go.
I had a feeling you might be.
Yeah. How about now?
Looks good.
Yes.
Yay. All right. Thank you for that. And you know what I will do? I'm just going to go back a little bit, just again for visual learners, just to see what I shared and to also know that it's here for you. We will make sure that it's shared post-event. Um, but we have our values of quality here. And also in the deck that you will receive, you'll see the events. And you can also see them in Eventbrite. And then here's where I left off. So, yes, if you have not already registered, we hope that you are with us for the State of the Arts convening. This will be on Tuesday at Malcolm X from 12 to 3:30. It'll be such Will do, Emily. Let me just wrap up here, but it'll be such an amazing time to come together with community and really hear the latest data around what we're learning about arts education in CPS schools. Here you go. Awesome. And Emily, also the absolutely, you are welcome. You will receive this deck too in the follow-up as well. So also want to share our objectives. So we like to have the head, heart, hands objectives, knowing that we are more than just our brains. We also feel things when we are in these spaces, and we also want to be able to do things when we come out of these spaces. So, our intellectual objectives is that we want to be able to understand this framework that I'll be sharing from the National Equity Project called the Lens of Systemic Oppression. And that's really what we want to kind of contextualize personal biases in. We also want to be able to reflect vulnerably on how we hold implicit biases, regardless of who we are, where we are, and what we do. We all have them. So, how can we do some of that reflection today? And then also think about what our next steps can be in interrogating and being continuously reflective. And this is not a deficit statement, meaning that folks aren't. It just means that it's an ongoing practice and that it's really hard to do alone. So doing this together and talking about this together is really a powerful way to continue our practices and to support our practices. I also want to tie this session back to the Arts Partner Standards of Practice, which are, again, co-created collective work done at Ingenuity. It was about 2018 with the arts education sector and really building out arts partner standards around what good practices are. And so today's session is really grounded in this domain one, build capacity for quality around creating a healthy classroom culture, as well as preparing for quality instruction, composing the environment. And I would say that's even really will be more so focused in the community of practice. But some of that will be talked about today as well. And so in a moment, we'll go into our community agreements and land acknowledgement. I will share that framework. We will hear from Hyde Park School of Dance. We will have some breakout group reflections. We had them in our last Learning Institute and got some feedback. I think it can be hard sometimes to share. And we also, in the spirit of working with young people and pushing ourselves sometimes out of our comfort zones, we again want to make sure that we are to the best of our ability and also, right, like we will share whatever we feel comfortable sharing, but we do want to have folks talk about it because it's an opportunity to learn from each other as well. And then we will close. So in an ideal world, we would create the community agreements together. But for the sake of time, I will offer some and would love if someone could go off audio or off mute rather and read them out loud. And then we'll open it up around, is there anything missing? Is there anything that folks have questions around as we, again, really think about how we will engage as a community? So I will go ahead and put them on here. And wondering if there's anyone that would be willing to read them out loud and call them into the space for the group.
I can take the first one. Take space, make space from a place of personal awareness of identity and intersectionality.
Speak from personal experience.
Practice confidentiality, take away lessons, but not person content.
Hold and support safe, brave space.
Stay present and engaged.
Thank you all. And also want to just name the practice confidentiality. There's an A and an L missing. So take away lessons, but not personal content. So just wanted to clarify that. You read it correctly, Allison. That was on our end. But just wondering, yeah. Yeah, just want to open it up. Is there anything that folks have a question around? If not, if you could actually just give a thumbs up, or go off camera and give a thumbs up, whether it's the reaction or off camera or in the chat, to say that you're good with the agreements, we will move forward. Okay. Absolutely, Emily. Okay. Well, I am going to move us forward. And at any point, if folks want to jump in, please do. I also know, some folks might be driving, or in spaces where they might not be able to engage with the chat, which is what we want you to not do because we want people to be safe. So again, I will move forward, but, please pause us at any point if there's something that's standing out to you. So, some session norms and housekeeping for today. So, yes, please, here it is, right? Use the chat to share thoughts, questions, and reactions. I think this is also a small enough space where folks wanted to go off mute, like that works too. Whatever is comfortable for people, whatever is comfortable and safe for people. Please take care of yourself. We will go all the way to the end without a break. So, take your bio breaks, your stretch breaks as needed, or take care of the things that you need to take care of. Please mute when you're not speaking. The closed captioning is available, will be available on the video. And the slides will be shared after the session. So both of those things will be after the session. And in case you don't already know, although I think everyone has to give permission, this session is being recorded. And when we do share out the video, we don't share any of the breakout group conversations. It's more so these larger conversations because we have a lot of folks that do watch the videos because they're not able to attend during this time. So, do want to share our land acknowledgement. And we want to acknowledge that this convening, even on video, right, because we are in Chicago, is taking place on the stolen and unceded land of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Adawa Nation. And because of the Great Lakes and the land naturally became a site of travel, of healing, of trade, and gathering for more than a dozen other Native tribes, and is home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois that still practice their traditions and care for the land. And also want to acknowledge that Black History Month is every month, and that Black history is also Chicago's history. So it's also really important to name and recognize Black American contributions of people of African descent and recognize the contributions of Black immigrants and American-born workers, while also recognizing the ongoing impacts of injustice on the Black community. And also want to acknowledge, this feels really appropriate right now, is that this is a hard time for the arts community, the arts education community. There's a lot going on the national landscape. And there are no easy answers, but I am appreciative for being able to come together and be together and know that we're not alone. So again, want to make sure that that piece is acknowledged and that at a minimum, Ingenuity is here to advocate for arts education in all the ways that we can. And we know that so many of you and others are as well. Also, it feels really, really, really important. You all probably have this information, but just again, it just is really important for us to name out loud that we do check in around student safety. And if you can just excuse me for one moment, I'm going to let a few folks in. There we go. This has been communicated through CPS, but if you haven't already, please regularly check the CPS. The CPS guidance and resources regarding the new presidential administration webpage for guidance on engaging with and protecting students. So this, again, is information that has been shared, right? That regardless of this policy change, CPS will maintain its current policies and procedures to actively protect students, staff, and their families. So in accordance with the Illinois Trust Act and Chicago's Welcoming City Ordinance, CPS does not ask our families for immigration status, will not coordinate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, does not share student records with ICE, except in the rare case where there is a court order or consent from the parent or guardian, will not allow ICE agents access to CPS facilities unless they produce a criminal judicial warrant signed by a federal judge, and will not admit ICE agents into schools based upon an administrative warrant, an ICE detainer, or other documents issued by an agency enforcing civil immigration law. And a lot of you are in schools, or you have to think about what it means, right, to have CPS students. And I know there are already some arts organizations that have reached out and are kind of making sure they understand their rights, right? So knowing your rights. So unfortunately, this is, something that we have to think about. But again, just wanted to make sure that we also shared it here, just as due diligence. And so, with all of that, right, rooting in community, this conversation is important. Um, and again, just want to name for folks that entered after I shared this, we decided to have the personal biases conversation in the Learning Institute and then dig a lot deeper into the pathways to accessibility in the communities of practice, which is happening on March 6th, because we didn't want to just pass over personal biases. And what I'm going to share here before Hyde Park School of Dance shares out is how we think of personal biases and how we contextualize it in the framework or the landscape of larger systems. So the National Equity Project, which is a nonprofit organization that works with districts across the country and ensuring that they have equitable systems and structures in their schools and their larger institutions, has this framework around how they think of the different lenses of systemic oppression. And so they name the individual, the interpersonal, institutional, and structural. And they use this language, right? Some phenomena playing out at each level. So they talk about kind of how it might play out at each level. They talk about how at an individual level, there we have it, implicit bias, explicit bias, internalized depression may show up that way. How at an interpersonal level, it can show up as microaggressions. How at an institutional level, right, there are policies and practices that are biased. And at a structural level, there are opportunity structures for some, right? Systems of advantage and disadvantage. I remember when I first saw this, the difference between institution and structural was a little blurry, but at the end of the day, I think thinking about both is really important. And institution typically means like an organization or a place that has kind of its own policies, if you will, as stated here. So just want to give folks a moment to kind of look through that. And I'm also going to drop in the chat a link with the actual framework if folks prefer to look at that before I kind of go through just a list of assumptions that we want to name and we ask that you all think about as we think about personal biases. So just take a moment. Let's take the next 5 minutes to just kind of read through, let's kind of see how National Equity Project is thinking about these systems. And then I will bring you all back in 5 minutes. Well, Iowa will move us forward. But again, just wanted to kind of share a little bit more about the framework and what they're saying. I think the other thing that felt really important, again, as we think about personal biases, was to just share some assumptions, right? So really, again, contextualizing, let me pause. So Emily said the distinction between structural and institution is helpful to me. Got it. Yes. Awesome, Emily. I'm glad that's helpful. Yeah, and it's language, right, to use, which I think is always helpful. And didn't always have. Um, it's a way to empower ourselves in spaces, but also to reflect on how we show up in these spaces too. And again, really thinking about personal biases not just being this kind of thing that's existing on its own, but really like it's happening within these larger systems that we are all in and surrounded by, grew up in, work in. Um, and so wanted to share the following assumptions. Um, Again, just to name kind of some things that stand out to us. And this is also in the handout. But the first one is that oppression and injustice are human creations and phenomena built into our current economic system. Um, it says it can't be undone is one of their assumptions. And I don't know if it could never, but it would take a whole lot of something for it to be undone. That is for sure. Another assumption is that oppression is more than just the sum of individual prejudices. Its patterns are systemic and therefore self-sustaining, without dramatic interruption. Systemic oppression exists at the level of institutions, so the policies and practices across structures that are interconnected and reinforcing over time. Systemic oppression has historical antecedents. So we must face our national legacy, our current manifestations, right, of all the things in order to transform them. And without rigorous examination, behavior is reproductive. So this is a big one. And again, this is something for all of us. We go into these spaces assuming that all of us need to do this work. No one is exempt from this work, but without rigorous examination, behavior is reproductive. So by default, current practices, cultural norms, and institutional arrangements foster and maintain inequitable outcomes. To undo systemic oppression, we must forge multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilingual alliances and create democratic processes that give voice to new organizing systems for humanity. And of course, this is within our sphere of influence, which again, we know it's a hard time. And we also want to make sure that we don't lose our hope within the sphere of influence that we have. And last, addressing oppression and bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious, inevitably raises strong emotions. And they use the word clients because they work with districts across the country. But that it is a time to be, it's always important to be prepared and trained to be able to talk about these things, right, in a way that is non-reactive, which is really, really hard. Well, again, just want to ground all of this, as I said earlier, in the power of solidarity and coming together and being in these spaces together. And also, I'm just super, super excited to have Hyde Park School of Dance really share their story around navigating bias and change, and really thinking about inclusivity. So I am now going to hand it over to them.
Thank you so much, Lily. And thank you to Ingenuity for having us here today and for everybody who joined today's session and watches it later. As I mentioned before, but for anybody who joined later, my name is Tara Ortiz Dernbaugh. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director at Hyde Park School of Dance. So I'll get us started here with just a little bit of some context and framing for what we'll share today. And I will also then invite my colleagues in to give their firsthand accounts. Admittedly, I'm the newest to the HPSD team out of the three of us. I've been with the organization a little over a year, not quite a year and a half, but it has been a fantastic journey to be able to dive in and really understand this organization from the inside and the outside simultaneously. So I'm thrilled to share a little bit about us. So Hyde Park School of Dance is a 31-year-old dance education nonprofit. We operate a dance school, and we're also an arts partner with CPS in school and after school programs. As an organization, our values center around inclusion, accessibility, and community engagement. But as we've grown over the 31 years, we've realized we can't assume that our organizational values are automatically reflected throughout all of the daily interactions that various members of our team have and that happen within our dance community. So some of our underlying understandings that govern kind of what we'll share today includes that personal bias isn't just about individual attitudes. It's a lot of, these, the lens of systemic oppression that Lily was sharing. These individual attitudes impact interpersonal relationships, and they impact the institutional level as individuals shape the systems, policies, and practices across the field of arts education. Many of us have spent years thinking about inclusion, but institutional growth and change really requires intentionality to ensure that values don't get diluted. A lot of that, you can kind of see those oppositional forces between the systemic side weighing down on the institutional. When the intentions are good, you operate within a systemic place from oppressive structures that can really inhibit growth unless there's a lot of intentionality. And the arts can either reinforce traditional power structures or actively work to dismantle the barriers. And so as an organization, our goal is to do the latter, and I'm sure that resonates with all of you here today. And our organizational values must reflect the true decision-making and prioritization of the organization at every level. These values must shine through, especially when it's the hardest and met often with the most pushback. It's a give and take about listening, but also driving forward the things that we know really reflect our values day to day. So a little bit about what we hope to share with you today is about how we're working to get our faculty, staff, and our programs on the same page using shared language and intentional practice. This is about how do our institutional values permeate the individual and the interpersonal interactions. We'll share some examples of small but impactful shifts that we have made, and also the understanding that this work is ongoing and imperfect. We are still learning for sure, as we all are. It is a lifelong journey of learning when it comes to building inclusive systems that really address personal bias and look to dismantle a lot of the barriers that the systems of oppression put in place. And what we'll share today is clearly not exhaustive, but just a few specific examples throughout the history of HPSD that we've been doing over the years and what we're working towards today that can highlight some practical application of these values. So something that kind of guides me as a practitioner, as a leader, is before I joined Hyde Park School of Dance, I'm a lifer in the field of nonprofit arts education administration. And I was lucky to attend a national session with a woman leader named Robin Walker Murphy. She's an arts and cultural strategist and social justice educator and administrator out of New York. She's worked with Groundswell and DreamYard out in New York City that do fantastic work in the field, very community-based. And she, in this session that she was leading, said a quote, and I'm paraphrasing because this was real life and I didn't have my notebook, but she said, "You must see yourself in the youth that you serve. You have to be able to see yourself." And this really resonated with me and has become a driving principle behind my work. And it just beautifully aligns with the efforts that Hyde Park School of Dance has been implementing for years. At HPSD, we want our faculty, our instructors, our staff to see ourselves in our students, but also ensure that there are adults, leaders, role models in the space who they can see themselves in as well. And I'll say that that is more expansive than just physical appearance or identity, but there's a lot of depth within that that really creates those authentic relationships where we are trying to get rid of any of those personal biases, push them to the side, work through them in order to really interact in the human level. So that's a little bit about our high level, kind of where we're starting. And I'd love to pass it off to my colleague, Allison, our Director of Community Engagement, to share a little bit more about her history with the organization and how she's seen it grow and change and where she's leading us in our Community Engagement Division. Over to you, Allison.
Thank you, Tara. Again, my name is Allison. I am the Director of Community Engagement for Hyde Park School of Dance. But my connection to the institution is very deep in that the school was founded by my mother, Marilyn Shepard, 31 years ago, along with our artistic director, August High. And so I have a really deep knowledge of why the school was started and the values that both of them intended to bring into the space. And one of them definitely was inclusivity, making the arts accessible. And I know that in the beginning, for them, accessibility really was focused on financial accessibility. We knew obviously that there were barriers that kept some dancers away. And so they started this amazing scholarship program to make sure that anyone who wanted to dance at Hyde Park School of Dance could dance. Um, and so that was kind of the big journey for them in the beginning. And I think that everyone quickly realized that inclusivity is more than that. They're not just the financial barriers. There are lots of barriers that come to exposing children, adults, anyone to the arts. And so the school started to delve deeper into that and do things to make the arts even more accessible. I've had the unique perspective of being the first student, daughter of the founder, first student of the school, going on to become a faculty member and director, and now on the admin team with community engagement. So I've been able to see the organization through many different perspectives throughout my years here. And it's been really wonderful to see, but really educational to see what goes into actually making change and to see where we still need to make change as well. That I'm still here, and obviously there is more to do. One of the first things I noticed with Hyde Park School of Dance is the faculty. We have a very diverse faculty, which I think is one of the more important things to make arts accessible to younger students, especially because they can see themselves in the teachers. Our teachers look we have representation from so many different groups, and I think it's nice that our students get to see that. It's definitely one of our core values, and I think that also trickles down to our students because they see faculty that look like them, parents see faculty that look like them, and they in turn bring their students to our school, which is wonderful because our school looks like us. It looks like the faculty. We're able to make arts accessible to all of those different groups. Of course, our scholarship program is great still as well to make sure that financial barriers are not something that keep students from learning about dance, from attending performances. One of my favorite times of the year is Nutcracker season when we have the student matinee, which I think is super important because these students, a lot of them, this is their first exposure to the arts in general. Definitely a lot of them, this is their first show that they've attended. And it's such a wonderful representation because they will see someone on stage that looks like them because of the diverse faculty we have, because of our diverse student body. And so I do think that's a great way to expose and kind of break down some barriers. But we also, show different forms of dance in this as well. They see like it's not just ballet. We have hip hop, we have jazz, we have modern, we have African. So it's just as wonderful exposure to make people feel more comfortable and get exposure to this art form. But we do recognize that really for our institutional practices, making arts more accessible has to go deeper than that, right? It has to go a lot deeper into our organization. We have to look at smaller things as well. It can't just be about performance and bringing everybody in. I have an example that I like to share. Early on, we discussed having a uniform for our ballet classes, as much most dance studios do. And we had black leotards, pink tights, and pink shoes, and just kind of traditional ballet attire. Not surprising. So everyone was wearing these tights and shoes. And at some point, because we had a faculty member who danced with Dance Theater of Harlem, which I'm not sure if you all are familiar, but it is the first Black ballet company in this country, and I think right now still one of the few ones. But she had come back from dancing with him professionally, and we also had a couple of students who went there for a summer intensive, and they all came back and said they thought it would be a nice idea for us to consider having flesh tone tights and shoes for the students rather than pink. To provide a little bit of context, the reason that pink is the color of ballet shoes and tights stems from the idea in ballet that you want to create the longest unbroken line possible with your body, right? So from fingers to toes, you want to create a line that appears to be unbroken. And traditionally, the dancers are closer to the color of the pink tights and shoes. So it's intended to match their skin tone. Um, and that has been a tradition that has just continued and continued and continued until people like the dancers of Dance Theater of Harlem realized their line actually was broken by the pink tights and pink shoes, and that they needed to kind of transition to having tights and shoes that matched their skin tone. So we did agree with this as a faculty, as an artistic team, admin, and we decided to change to say now the uniform is you're wearing your flesh tone tights and shoes. And we were met with just this tremendous amount of pushback. Dancers and parents, the parents found it was going to be an extra expense. It was going to take time to color these shoes, and they were already spending so much time at the dance studio. The students did not want to take the time to do it either. And so we decided to make it a teaching moment and to explain why we were doing this, how kind of the institutional practices within ballet are biased, right? This is why we're trying to get past this and make a change. And while change is challenging and hard, and yes, it is an extra cost, it does take more time. It was to help shift the ballet culture away from where it had been and to make it more inclusive. And I know Amber, who you'll hear from next, is going to talk about that a little bit. She was one of the students there and how that impacted her. But we are aware that doing little things like this within our own institution can help. And hopefully, as we send our dancers out into the world, and Amber will talk about this as well, they take that with them. And so the change becomes bigger than HPSD. Our students go out and they take our values into the greater, broader arts community as well. Community engagement is where I spend a lot of my time. At HPSD, it's really my passion. We are able to take our values out into the community through this program. And we are currently in some CPS schools, some private schools. We've been in park districts, but it's really important to us that all of our internal values go out with the teaching faculty that we send out. And we've been very lucky to have teaching faculty that understand this and are able to do this in a really meaningful way. But for us, it's service. We are serving the community. We are giving back to communities that have given so much to us, mainly support, kids coming to our shows, any of that. So we do see it as an opportunity to take these values out and support our community. We do programming to fit the spaces we are in. So we customize what we're doing to meet the needs of the students that we serve in each place uniquely, and really take the time to hear the voices of the students that we are reaching and supporting. And I find that to be a really unique part of our program, because our teachers are coming from within our organization, sharing these values, and it's very uniform, right? The classes are different, different techniques, different styles, but our value system remains the same in all of the spaces that we are in. And one of the stories I love is Amber, who you'll hear from again. I keep referencing her, but she's one of our teachers, and she's at Bret Hart with a program. And the principal mentioned to me that when we are having programming in that school, the grades of the students who are involved in arts education go up. They seem to be more confident, they are more focused, and their education is positively impacted by the experience they're having with us. And so I think it is great that we're able to go into all these diverse schools. They're all very different, the ones we go into, and have this amazing impact on these students. And again, I think it's because at HPSC, we are willing to have the tough conversations. We're willing to say, you know, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing right? We're willing to examine them. And before I pass off to Amber, just a quick story. We were putting together a ballet. It was a new ballet, the artistic team was, and there were a bunch of scenes, and there was one scene that was problematic for some of the students. And we invited them to come and talk to us about it. We had a meeting with them, and it was really nice to hear their perspective and why it was problematic for them and why they felt like we should make some changes. And we were able to do that. And the students taught us, which is also obviously anyone who's taught knows you learn more from your students than they learn from you. So it was just a great moment for us. But I think that speaks to who our institution is. We are willing to listen, have the tough conversations, and we're willing to change. If it takes us making changes, small or big, we are willing to do that. And with that, I'll introduce you to Amber. She is one of my former students. She is a faculty member. She's part of the community engagement team. She's marketing director. She's all things for HPSC, but really happy to introduce her.
Thank you, Allison. Again, my name is Amber Eccles. I have been with this organization for about 25 years. I started off as a young dancer. I started to grow more and ending up going into our youth studio company. I then later went to college, came back, worked in the administrative office, and then I ended up being a faculty member, and now I'm a director with one of our youth companies as well. So basically what Allison was saying about our flesh tone, shoes and tights, I was one of the students that was part of that discussion with one of the fellow faculty members, basically introducing me and some of my peers to Dance Theater Parlum. I was very excited. I ended up going to that summer intensive. I started to learn a lot just about just like the flesh tone shoes and tights. And so once we came back, I was like, I think we should do this. And so we had that discussion and they're like, all right, let's figure out how we can do that. And a lot of times it took a while with like a lot of the trials and research, just trying to find like the right tights. How do we dye our shoes? Because at that time, no ballet shoes were um, basically we had to like figure out how to dye our shoes. They were still pink or white, so it was just a lot of research. But once we were able to do that, it made me feel more confident in my dancing. Going to ballet class, I felt like I could see that one line that my instructors kept on talking about, and it just didn't click when I had my pink tights and ballet shoes. And so with that, that helped me build my confidence going to college because in college I saw everyone with the pink tights and pink ballet shoes, but I was like, nope, I'm gonna wear my my flesh tone shoes and my tights. my teachers have never seen it before. They were just like, oh, wow. But they could see my lines and it was beautiful. And so I was able to perform on stage with my flesh tone tights and ballet shoes, which brought out more confidence within myself. And I think that's also what helped me become a teacher, because the confidence that I had built with HBSD, I was making sure that I brought it to my students when I came. I think that was like the biggest thing that I learned from HBSD. They helped build my confidence. They were able to like listen to what I and my peers were trying to like say, just about just representation of like how I can feel better as a dancer. And so it just also just helps me guide my students to be more confident in themselves and their dancing. And like I said, just like with the representation, HPSC has had a lot of tremendous representation with their faculty. And that also helped me become more confident in saying I want to be a professional dancer and an instructor, because I saw people that looked just like me and they went through the same path that I was trying to achieve. Um, and so I think when I go to a community engagement site, just like Bret Hart, it warms my heart when I see the students just, their faces brighten up when they see someone that looks just like them and they get to learn ballet because they probably seen someone else that didn't look like them. And they were like, oh, maybe I can't do this. But the fact that now their instructor is someone that looks just like them and teaching them something that they were so excited to learn. It just warms my heart. Um, but I also had said in my site, yes, we're going to learn dance. We're going to learn our pliés and our tendus, but it's also just more with that in the school. Like, I want them to learn how to carry themselves as young students, not just on the dance floor, but also just in their classroom. And I think that's what Alice and I have seen, like from the principal, Mr. Bright, their academic like levels have gone up because they feel more confident, because we talk about how we can carry ourselves and show more confidence on a day-to-day basis instead of just on stage. And I have an example of a student that I had met a few years back. She came to one of my classes, and the reason why she came to my class was because she didn't get into her on her dance team in high school. And she was like, well, I want to get into this dance team. So I signed up for class and I was like, all right. So she's in class every week, learning and pushing. And of course, like any other human, you're assuming this is our goal. We're trying to get her into this dance team and everything. But I had to take a step back and I had to continue to just teach her different styles of dance and talk to her more about dance. And then later on, I asked her, I wasn't assuming, I asked, what are your goals now? And so we talked about it, and she's just like, I just wanted to find the love of dance again because it went away when I got rejected from being on the dance team. And so I was like, all right, well, here are some more options for you. And so she ended up being in our studio company and just loving it. And so she just went away to college. And I remember she just told me, she's like, well, I'm not going to major in dance, but I have the love of dance and I want to keep that with me. And she also built that confidence because she found that love of dance again. And just for fun, she ended up like auditioning for her college dance team and ending up making the dance team because she had that confidence. And so I think sometimes people want to basically assume that students need saving and we know what's best for them. But instead we should just partner with the students and also just like with the families and ask them what are their goals. And I think that will also help instead of just keep on assuming. So I think I'll just pass it back to Tara.
Amber and Allison, thank you so much. And yeah, I think what Amber said really resonates in this. It's an ongoing, it's a constant process. I mentioned that in the beginning and just in terms of institutional change, but every interaction is a constant ongoing process. You're not checking boxes ever. You want to listen, but that doesn't mean you listen once. You listen again and again, and you keep operating with that curiosity to understand that person, to see that whole person, their whole identity, their whole humanity. And that is how we can transcend our personal biases that we might hold, is by looking at every human as all of the beauty that they have within them that comes from who they are, their lived experience, and understanding that that's going to be different with every single individual. And that is a beautiful thing. That is how we learn and grow and thrive as a society, by giving voice to everyone, by giving space to everybody, by making space where it's not there, so that we have all of this brilliance, all of this perspective, all of these lived experiences at the table. It makes us all better people. And ultimately, that's my goal for humanity, is to see everybody being their best self and bringing their best self to the table. So another example, sorry, I get all feely and get off script, but another example of some of the work that we do is pretty surface. Is in ballet, similar to the pink tights, the traditions run deep. There are very traditional gendered roles, for example, in ballet. The male part, the female part, you know it, you can picture it, right? The one who does the lifting, the one who gets lifted. And something that HPSD has done over the years is understanding that gender is more than that. Gender is open, gender can be fluid, gender can be everything in between. And it can be hard to pick a box, right? To put yourself in a box. So little changes, again. Our faculty teaches at the end of our pre-ballet classes curtsies and bows. Not that one gender curtsies and the other gender bows. They learn both. And then as they get older, they choose, they decide, do you want a curtsy or bow at the end of your class? We also let students self-select into the type of work that they're doing, as far as advanced dancers go, where you might have a traditional male variation versus a traditional female variation, or point work, which is known as a female thing. That is not hard and fast at HPSD. If you get to that level and you want to be on point, it does not matter the gender you were assigned at birth. It is about who you are and how you express yourself artistically. And we don't dictate our casting by gender. One thing that the team pointed out when we were talking in advance is our Nutcracker traditionally has a mouse queen. That is pretty unusual. And it is fierce and deserves that title. And the head of household for the Stahlbaum family, that is classically the family in the Nutcracker, is the mayor is the wife of the couple. And we have plenty of gender fluid opening number, and we don't restrict to that. So it's just looking at those things, questioning tradition, seeing where things are tradition that is steeped in the systemic oppression that we still feel today, and how we can fight against that in little small steps, like teaching curtsies and bows. And so as a faculty and staff, it's interesting because institutionally, these have been our grounding values. But as the organization grows, how do we ensure that every individual is really embracing these values and living these values as they are part of our organization? So we can't just assume that those values are still there because we say it, because leadership believes it, because those who have been here for a long time operate that way. So we've started being more intentional about our faculty and staff training, looking into bias, looking into inclusion, looking to how we understand these things and how we navigate them. And the goal is not to correct anybody, but it's to ensure everyone understands how bias impacts their teaching and their interactions. A tool that I absolutely love as far as bias goes, and many of you are probably familiar, is Harvard's implicit association tests. I'll drop the link in here if anybody is curious and hasn't seen it before. But I find these very valuable as an outside check it puts together, you can select many different binaries, and it leads you through these to kind of see where some really unconscious stuff might be hidden that affects how your responses come in. And so I find this really useful. This is something I shared with our faculty and staff this year as well. It's just a great tool to examine yourself. And because we are in a society built around systemic oppression, and we may hold internalized biases that are contradictory to our own values or personal identities. And those are sometimes very hard for us to see because we can't imagine feeling that way. But because of the systems that we've all grown up in and been indoctrinated into in many ways, they creep around in there. And so it's a really good tool that I recommend. And if anybody else has other tools that they like for that, please, by all means, I'm always wanting to learn and share. But it's kind of been a step that we've been doing to try to help encourage people to know what they think and feel versus what actually may come out in the interpersonal. And so it's all about the small steps towards a big impact. This work is about the incremental intentional shifts. That is what truly matters. And, we really want to question those assumptions that we have ingrained in us, question assumptions about student ability or discipline or seriousness that may manifest in different identities or different communities or different backgrounds. And so I'll leave you, I know Lily will lead us through some additional reflection, but I'll leave you with just thinking one of the things that I like to think about at the end of a conversation like this is what is one small thing that you can do in your work today to move the needle just a little bit about making an intentional change within your own teaching or your leadership that helps you understand the biases you may hold and helps you work past those and try to break those down to get to that place of seeing full humanity, full authentic relationship building, trust and understanding that comes when we can get rid of those biases and just connect as humans. So thank you all.
Y'all, join me in thanking Hyde Park School of Dance. Thank you so much. This has just been so great. I am totally biased. So talk about personal bias. But I am totally biased. So my daughter's in the picture on the right, with the younger dancers, and I'm very familiar with the school. And just yeah, I am a witness, and I can testify to just everything that they do, and who they are. So thank you all so, so much. Give them some love if you haven't already, if you're able to, in the chat or with emojis. And yeah, I think so. What Tara said is what we are going to do, right? We want to continue reflecting. And I think the question that you posed is so powerful. And I do want us to spend some time doing that right now. And so this is really about relating with ourselves, right? So we think about how the work trickles out. Again, as Hyde Park School of Dance shared, like how that work trickles out is really the work that they're doing and listening to folks. I also think like we're at a time when it's really easy to look at all of the madness outside of us, which is real, but how we still can be the medicine in a lot of these spaces and again in our sphere of influence. So really want to take some time to do some reflection work. And this is a quote, I've shared it before. Social change is deeply connected to our own healing, reflection, and well-being. Dr. Sean Ginwright, from the Four Pivots, Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves. And so we're going to spend some time in a right pair share, where we will spend 5 minutes just silently on our own, on camera, off camera, whatever's comfortable for you, thinking about this prompt here, which is how do I interrogate my biases? Who holds me accountable? How do I know Do my students and families get an opportunity to hold me accountable? And families being are the students' families. And again, this is a question for us to just all think about. I have teenage daughters that hold me accountable every day. Whew. And there are things that they name for me, no matter how much of an awesome mom I try to be and I aspire to be. Like the adultism is real, that I've learned that I'm trying to unlearn. And that's just like one form of bias that, again, they hold me accountable to. It's not always easy for me to listen to. Um, but there might be other things and other biases that I have to really think about how I am holding myself accountable to those. So I am going to drop the prompt into the chat. And we're going to spend the next 5 minutes just reflecting on that, taking some time. It's also good for a stretch break if that's what you need. And then when we come back, we'll actually go into breakout rooms in pairs for a 10-minute just discussion and talk about this prompt, anything that's coming up for you around the prompt, or something else that's coming up for you around personal biases, and then we'll come back whole group. But for now, we'll stay here in the shared Zoom with everyone. So let's take the 5 minutes to reflect on the question. And if anyone has a question around this task, go ahead and go off mute or chat me. But I will start the clock now and we'll let folks know when the 5 minutes is up. Okay, so that was 5 minutes. And so now I am going to move folks into a breakout room. And really, again, the purpose is for us to have these shared discussions. And before we do that, I do want to share some breakout group norms and agreements so that folks are as comfortable as possible in the breakout space. And first of all, you will have a total of 10 minutes. Please take a minute or two to introduce yourselves in the space, and then take 4 minutes each to share to the prompt. Take turns, keeping each other's time, or take your own time, but just kind of decide how you'll take time or keep time so that not one person speaks the entire time. We want you to stay aware of identity and intersectionality, continue to speak from personal experience. And this is really important. So practice confidentiality, take away lessons, but not personal content. Again, like our norms, we want to make sure that, folks can share as openly as they can and trust that it is a safe space. So please hold and support safe, brave space. And again, share as little or as much as you choose. We are all sovereign folks that, can make that decision on our own. So with that, I am going to open all rooms. I'll let you know when we start winding down on time. And if for some reason your partner and you are not able to have a discussion, please let me know. And I will definitely problem solve to make sure that folks are able to engage in some discussion. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Hey. All right. So, as we wrap up, it's good to see faces. Never an expectation to be on camera because I know folks are at home and there's a lot going on, but it's also just really nice to see faces. Um, yeah, would love to just open it up. Any reflections, thoughts, questions, dissonance, just like anything that folks want to share. Um, and again, just want to remind folks about the confidentiality. So if you haven't asked your partner to share, please don't. But if there's something general you can share, or definitely your own reflections and thoughts and questions you want to share, want to open that up for folks now.
I'll jump right in because I never remembered to put my mute back on. I was talking with Allison, and what I was talking to her about were the fact that I've, over the years gotten very comfortable with what people tend to think of as biases when they think of biases, against certain colors, cultures, whatever. My personal biases come when I am engaging with a more conservative culture than myself. So I work with Orthodox Jewish cultures, I work with Catholic schools. Even within CPS, often you'll find yourself in a deeply religious pocket community. Um, and so talking about where I come head to head with bias would be when I am being the liberal and the school is supporting the liberal choice, but the parents insist on the conservative choice. Or the student comes and wishes to make a liberal choice, but the school won't support that choice. The example I was using is the little boy who wants to be the Wicked Witch, because there have been many, many successful cross castings in that way of children of genders that don't match the cast, but still have a wonderful performance and has nothing to do with their orientation or their personal gender identity. So like that for me is much harder than dealing with the kind of biases I think most people think of when they think about examining personal bias, which is trying to make yourself remember to be a liberal and open-minded person. Is more like, how do I respect the conservative values of this culture while still making sure to retain my values as an educator and what students can and can't do in the arts.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing. Yes. It is a tall order.
I'd like to say something that I found is like a reoccurring theme around literature and interpretations of literature. So I feel like the ability to gain access to helpful literature is one barrier or the one challenge that we face. And then um, once we're able to find the time to read that, then being able to have a conversation about it, since there's going to be multiple interpretations from that. So having people that you can rely on to walk through that together is certainly something that comes to mind.
Thank you, Anthony.
Something that resonated for me in the conversation was the importance of the people you surround yourself with and having people who you can count on but not depend on to call you out, to call you in, to identify things, to work through stuff with you. And so I think having that support system in different ways, within your work environment, outside of your work environment, whatever it might be, but that is kind of just making sure you know your people that you can break down that tough stuff with, know that you can be really open and honest and really work through some challenges like that. I think it's about who your people are and making sure that you create that space for yourself in your life one way or another.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be so necessary right now. I mean, it's always necessary, but just again, like making sure that we are in spaces where there's a lot of collectivism in the work that we're doing and solidarity. So thank you. Any final thoughts before we transition? Okay. So the deck will also have resources. So when we share all the slides and the follow-up email, we'll have the Arts Partner Standards of Practice, the guidance from CPS that I shared, which you all probably already have. But again, it's our responsibility to also just make sure they're out there and you have a link to that. Um, as well as some other, well, the system lens of systemic oppression, as well as an additional resource from the National Equity Project. We really hope that you're able to make the March 6th community of practice. It will be in person, and we'll have some information. I know this one will be on the west side. I don't know if there's anyone that can confirm that in this call from Artside Shy, but we will make sure that we share that out, where we will again build on this and really focus on the pathways to accessibility portion of this topic. And just want to also, again, give such a huge thanks to Hyde Park School of Dance for joining and sharing your stories. I think it's so powerful to share like the new, the one that's been there from the beginning, and then also the one that's come up through and working in schools. Just such a beautiful family of staff there, which I think is just so beautiful. And all of you for coming. We know that there are so many other places that you can be. So just really appreciate you being here and being in community. And to close, we just want to really think about what is like, how will we walk away today and think about what to do next, right? So this is the hands part of our objectives. So just want to ask folks, like, as a result of today's session, one way or another way, right? Because we know that you all are thinking about these things already. We might interrogate implicit bias within our organization and spaces is by. So if folks can add that into the chat, if you're able to, or share that out loud verbally, um, let's go ahead and share out how will things be different after today than they were before you got here. So having our staff meet and share stories of the biases they have both faced in others and found in themselves. Yep, that's so important. Thank you, Emily, for sharing. Anyone else before we close? Oh, another one come through. Creating space for more all voices and truly listening. Having students fill out surveys about their own interests, even if they have nothing to do with the topic at hand, what music, books, entertainment they consume. Taking the Harvard Project Implicit Questionnaire. Wonderful. These are great. Thank you all again for being here. Again, we hope to see you again. Whoa, wait, we have one more. I'll read it out loud before we go. Reflecting on the experiences shared today as reminders and working with those in my organization. Beautiful to have space and time to share choices for the youth as well. Thank you all so much. You will receive a follow-up again with the slides, a survey. Be well, be safe, and we hope to see you next Tuesday at the State of the Arts Education convening. So goodbye, everyone.